Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, we are discussing The Eyes of the Dragon today, and I don't love this book. I really was hoping that on rereading it I would appreciate it more, but I just don't love it. And a big part of it is this is not my type of book. Stephen King wrote this for his daughter because she doesn't like the scary stuff, or at least she didn't. I don't know what she thinks now, but she didn't like the scary stuff that he wrote. And he wrote this as a fantasy story for her, which I appreciate. I think that's, great parenting. And I just don't love fantasy. That's my problem. I, for years, did not read the Dark Tower series because it didn't interest me. I was very, very happy with the Dark Tower books once I did read them, but, they were always low on my list. I would rather have, gone through Stephen King's more supernatural stuff, and that's why they kept getting pushed aside. And I believe it wasn't until I was choosing books from the Stephen King Library Club where you get to make a whole selection of what you want them to send to you. And at that point I was like, you know what? I'll just request all of those and then I'll read them at that point. And I'm glad I did because I love the Dark Tower series. So this one, The Eyes of the Dragon, I think part of what bothers me as well is that the king in here is named Roland. It's not really stated what the time is, but it does seem to kind of either parallel our Roland from the Dark Tower books, or it's not so far in the past or future. It's kind of within that area. And so it bothers me that the king is named Roland, especially because this king is so opposite of Roland. Opposite of Roland Deschain. If Stephen King had named him something else, I think I would have been much happier, actually, with the book. So let's jump into it real quick. These videos about this book aren't going to be very long. There's not much for me to say about it. So we have the Kingdom of Delane, which is not Roland Deschain's kingdom. Nonetheless, it's still within the same universe. King Roland the Good has two sons, Peter and Thomas. Now, the big thread that weaves through all of this stuff is that Flag is the magician assistant, well, not magician's assistant, he advises him. He's the advisor to the king. So he's kind of like Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. And Flag is always an interesting character, and he is just as evil in this book. And he really is the draw for me in this story. Peter is the older son. He will be the one who is set to rule, but Flag prefers to have Thomas. And mostly that's because Peter is not easily swayed. He is smarter than his father. He is more liked than his father. He's going to make a better ruler, and Flag won't be able to use him as a pawn the way he does with Roland, and how he could with Thomas. So the queen, Sasha, she died giving birth to Thomas, and it is attributed to some sort of accident, when in reality Flag knew the midwife and he had saved her son, and he said, one day I'll ask you for a favor and you'll have to do it. What came due was Sasha was to die during childbirth, so the midwife cut her while she was delivering and caused her to bleed out and die. So Roland favors Peter and he neglects Thomas, and a lot of it is probably because Thomas was kind of the cause of his wife's death and he loved her so much. So Thomas kind of gets the short end of the stick. Not necessarily intentionally, but I think that's just a thing that you probably think about. So Flag has control over Roland, and he makes these frothy concoctions for Roland to drink to give him energy and vigor, and it kind of changes his personality into an aggressive, kind of cruel man. That's usually when Roland would retire and have sex with Sasha, hoping to create a little prince. There was one night where Roland killed a dragon, the last dragon in the kingdom, and he was so excited that he bedded Sasha and did not take the concoction, and that's when Peter was conceived. So Peter was conceived minus this, and it always makes me think of Rosemary's Baby, where she has the tannis root shakes that she's supposed to drink, and I don't know, something about that is very similar in my brain. So Peter was conceived without any of Flag's influence, which could be part of why Peter is such a noble boy. And Thomas was conceived during one of Flag's double concoction nights where he gave Roland a shit ton of this drink, this potion. Now Thomas does hate Peter. He despises him. He is jealous. He feels like Peter gets, all of his father's attention and love, and Peter outshines Thomas in everything. Everything comes naturally to Peter. It reminds me of Hubble Gardner from The Way We Were. Everything came too easily to him. And Peter, I think, knows that Thomas hates him, but he still loves his brother. And I think that irks Thomas quite a bit. There's a part in the book where Thomas stones a dog to death. And the narrator says, quote, "He was never a bad boy, not really," page 54, right after telling us that he stoned this dog to death. And I don't know about you, but I judge people on how they treat animals. So for me, I don't care what Thomas does. I don't care what his backstory is. He's a little shit to me now. So Flag wants Peter out of the way, and he wants Thomas to ascend the throne. He also needs to figure out a way to get rid of Roland. So we find out that Flag has just been around. He's old. He's really, really old. And he will appear, and then he will cause trouble and disappear. And then when things have kind of settled down and rebuilt, he will appear again. And he is just so nondescript that people don't think that he's behind stuff. Whereas if he was the ruler, he never wants to be the king because the king will get blamed for things and beheaded or whatever. So he always likes to be the person whispering in the ear of the king, but nothing will ever come back on him because he can just slip away. And that's that. Quote, "Flag always showed up with a different face and a different bag of tricks, but two things about him were always the same. He always came hooded, a man who seemed almost to have no face, and he never came as a king himself, but always as the whisperer in the shadows, the man who poured poison into the porches of kings' ears." Page 56. So basically, an advisor to the king can just get away with so much more and then disappear and not have to worry about it, not have to clean up the mess, not have to deal with the fallout. Perfectly fine. So Flag has decided he is going to get rid of Roland using a poison, a really, really bad poison that makes you burn up from the inside. It's called dragon sand. And he is going to frame Peter. So he makes a drink for Roland. He brings it to him in a goblet. After Peter has brought Roland a drink, which is his ritual with his father, they sit and they drink a glass of wine, and then Peter leaves. So Flag knows about this, and he goes after Peter has left and gives Roland this really bad poison. Roland drinks it, and the entire time they're being watched. And Thomas is behind the eyes of the dragon that Roland killed. He has mounted in his study, in his chambers, and you can see, if you go behind the head, you can see through the eyes. So Thomas spies on his father a lot, and Flag is the one who taught him how to do this. So he is watching as Flag poisons his father, and he even feels as though Roland is in danger. but he doesn't break cover, he doesn't warn him, you know, he just lets it happen. And then Roland has this kind of resurgence of energy and all this vim and vigor, and then eventually, in a couple days, the poison works its way through him and burns him up. He starts like spewing smoke like a dragon and just kind of spontaneously combusts and dies. And Peter is blamed because Flag has planted some little specks of that dragon sand poison in Peter's room, which, being convicted on that kind of evidence, really scary. So that's where we'll leave it today. We'll talk about it. Probably just one more video on this one. Have a spooky day.